to your seats that you've gotten the answers, you've sufficiently greeted other characters, and you should at this point be digressing into, I'm sorry, you should be digressing into individual work. You should be answering that question. Was the United States justified in going to war? In just a second, we're going to talk about the analytical buckets that we could start using. So take the 3 minutes that we have left and go through your documents that you annotated and start pulling out those categories that we could use. I'm going to ask you to put them on the board. Alright, so I'm going to raise the screen and we're going to put them in one category or the other, and we'll talk about how well they fit and which documents we can use with them. Yes. What was it? Annotate. Guys, if you were absent on Friday, you need to start reading the documents and start annotating. Yeah.
So we're writing our essay based on the character
What you're doing is you're taking your generalized, what they are, and then you're using the documents. Yeah, guys, just so that we're clear, no confusion. You're using your character to answer the question yes or no, and then you're using your brain power and the documents from the packet to justify your character's answer.
Oh, okay.
Alright?
I thought we were supposed to use like the evidence.
No, you don't have enough evidence on your character sheet to do that. You're using your character to answer yes or no, and then your brain power to infer how to use or determine the importance of the documents to answer or justify that answer, yes or no. No. Guys, you do not need to go into detail on your character in the essay except for in the background. If you look on your packet there on the outline part, there is space for grabber and background in your paragraph 1. You can introduce your character and talk a little bit about your character in there, but I shouldn't see it down in here. You're using the primary source documents alone to justify your answer. You can do some research and find a name that was... Because the point of this was to give you an individual that really did live during this time period, to make this process seem more real. Every single character that you interacted with today lived during the Mexican-American War. Okay, so if you need a name for your character, you need to do some research outside and find somebody that fits that description. Right?
Because I think that'd be pretty easy because it says he got to sail into California to see the territory.
Okay. So you need a U.S. naval officer that was active during the Mexican-American War. Right.
Since we are kind of writing these essays from the point of view of these historical figures, is there going to be some bias in the survey, in the essay? Because like
There
we have a
will.
certain view.
Well, there's always bias
Right.
in what you're writing. Just like there was bias in the DLK essay that you wrote. Yes, there will be bias, but what I'm concerned about is whatever bias you have, can you use the primary source documents to adequately justify or refute U.S. actions? Think of it like if you're, again, the idea of you're watching a movie, and are there plot holes in your movie?
Okay.
Yeah.
Will we be writing this from the point of view of our character or from like our...
You're using the character to answer yes or no, and then it's your brain power to figure out how to justify their response.
Okay.
Can I use part of my persons because it talks about how they wanted to steal it after we didn't sell it to them.
You can use it in paragraph 1, but you have to get your body paragraphs from the primary sources. Because the documents that you were given are from myself or other teachers that have created those. Those are correct statements for that person, but that person never actually said those specific words. That's not a primary source. What I gave you is a secondary source that gave you information. I want you to use the primary sources that were in the packet for your justifications. Alright, so let's get the clock off. Actually, before we do the buckets, let's summarize real quick each of the documents so that we make sure that everybody has, because there were several people absent on Friday. Let's make sure that everybody's on the same page with the documents. Alright, document A. Did we get through document A on Friday?
Yes.
Alright. Do we feel comfortable with document A? Yes, no, maybe so? Anybody not feel comfortable with document A? Speak now or forever hold your peace. Alright. Document B. Document B is, let's take a look at our source. It's the war message of President James Polk, delivered to the House of Representatives and the Senate on May 11th of 1846. And so he gives the Senate and the House of Representatives a breakdown of what's happened, and then he calls for a war vote. Now, why does he give this speech directly to Congress and not to just the general public? Maria?
Because they're the ones voting on whether they're allowed to go to war.
Because Congress is the only one that has the power to declare war, right? If he had the power, then he wouldn't need to make this statement. He could just say, we're at war with Mexico. But he can't do that. He has to convince Congress to declare a war. And that's what he's doing. He's giving them reasons that they should vote yes to war. Right? So what we're not going to see in this document is anything that runs contrary to the purposes of his argument. We're not going to see anything about the fact that this is disputed land, that Mexico doesn't recognize Texas annexation in the first place. They don't even recognize that Texas is an independent nation. Mexico still says that they own Texas. Right? Polk omits that because that doesn't help his argument. But what does help his argument, he says, is that the Congress of Texas, we can see right here, the Congress of Texas, by its act of December 19th, 1836, had declared the Rio to be the border of that republic. Right? So if we do have a set boundary, then when the United States does annex Texas, then that boundary becomes the United States boundary. And they are bound to protect, defend that border if something happens near that border, which we know did with the Thornton affair. We know that Mexico passed the boundary of the United States, invaded our territory, and blood was shed, American blood was shed on American soil. Right? And we can look at this note right here. Look at the war vote. 2 days after he delivers this message, the U.S. Senate, 40 yes votes, only 2 no votes. House of Representatives, 174 yes votes, 14 no. Congress is very much in favor of this. It does not take Polk very much effort to convince them of this. Could we say this is a very good argument for going to war? It is a good argument if you are already predisposed to go to war because you believe in manifest destiny. If you aren't swayed by that argument, is there anything in here that justifies going to war? Jack?
in the United States' eyes, Mexico was like invading U.S. soil, and they spilled, and they shed American blood upon the American soil.
Right, but if you don't buy that argument that it is American soil, if you do agree that it's disputed territory, then is there anything in here that warrants a declaration of war? Not particularly. Maybe, depending on, well, we know that only 16 people were killed in the Thornton Affair. It's not like it was a mass execution of American soldiers. 16 people died. And we don't know how many Mexicans died. Alright, so let's take a look at number 5, the how does this document help answer the mini-Q. For pro, we said that Polk is making a case that Texas annexed itself to the United States, with the understanding that the Rio was the southern border, which means that once the United States annexes Texas, that border is now a U.S. border, which means they have to defend it. Right? On the other side, this document is an example of a pretty strained argument. Right? There is nothing on the other side of the issue. There's no counterclaims, there's no nothing, especially when we consider the fact that Mexico never accepted Texas secession or annexation. Right? So that border doesn't exist in their head where the United States says it does, where Texas says it does. Right? Document C, that's the first document that we actually get a Mexican perspective or a point of view. Our source is Jesus Velasco Marquez. He is a professor at a college in Mexico. And let's take a look at the difference between his perspective being a Hispanic citizen, a Mexican citizen, and the language that we've seen from Polk and O'Sullivan in Document A, who are both American and both favor Manifest Destiny. Says the most dramatic event in the history of relations between Mexico and the United States took place a century and a half ago. U.S. historians refer to this event as the Mexican War, while in Mexico, we prefer to use the term U.S. invasion. And so we already have a difference in opinion in what to call the event. Mexico calls it the U.S. invasion, implying a certain perspective on the events that transpired. From Mexico's point of view, the annexation of Texas to the United States was inadmissible for both legal and security reasons. Thus, when the Mexican government learned of the treaty signed between Texas and the United States in April of 1844, it would consider such an act a declaration of war. A declaration of war. Right? That definitely changes the tone of the argument. It puts the United States on the defensive. It says Mexico is reacting to a declaration of war. Not only was it a declaration of war, but in early 1846, when we know the troops commanded by Zachary Taylor entered that disputed area, we know that Mexico crossed over the river and engaged those troops. But here, Velasco Marquez says that in the eyes of the Mexican government, the mobilization of U.S. Army was an outright attack against Mexico. They were completely justified. They don't need to find a reason to justify it. The United States attacked them. That's interesting considering we say the exact same thing. Though they attacked us and they spilled American blood on American soil. Well, they're saying the same thing. That the United States attacked them on Mexican soil. As a consequence, the Mexican government reaffirmed the instruction to protect the border. Again, putting the blame on the United States. We're simply protecting our border. Alright, question 4. How does this document help answer the question? If we agree with this viewpoint, if we agree with Marquez's viewpoint, then Polk's argument in document B looks rather empty. Not only is it empty, but it's calculated. Right? If we take Velasquez Marquez's argument for what it's worth at face value, then Polk knew full well what was going to happen when he sent troops in there. Not only did he know, but he was counting on it. He didn't have a good enough reason to go to war with Mexico, so he needed to create one. He knew that if he sent troops in there that Mexico would respond, knowing that they didn't agree with where the border was, that if the United States crossed into the disputed territory, which Mexico said wasn't disputed, that was theirs, then they would attack the U.S. soldiers. Polk was not fighting to protect Americans on American soil. He was provoking the Mexican government into firing the first shot, if we are to believe Velasco Marquez. Then our final document, a second pro-Mexican document, Charles Sumner, Objections to the Mexican-American War, adopted by the Massachusetts State Legislature, 1847. And then we have a note that says Sumner was a young state legislator from Massachusetts who later served 24 years in the U.S. Senate. Now we will learn more about Charles Sumner later on, including a fiasco that occurred on the floor of Congress where he gets beat with his own cane for his anti-slavery stance. Alright, so we will see more of Charles Sumner. Already here in 1847 causing waves. Mexico, on achieving her independence from the Spanish crown, decreed the abolition of human slavery within her dominions, embracing the province of Texas. Right? That's in direct contradiction to O'Sullivan's comments, right? What did O'Sullivan say about Mexico? What did he call them? Turn back to document A. CJ, what did he call them? Imbeciles, which is a fancy word for stupid. Alright? But here, Charles Sumner, an American citizen, is saying that Mexico embraced the province of Texas. At this period, citizens of the United States had already begun to move into Texas. The idea was that this extensive province ought to become part of the United States. Manifest destiny. A current of immigration soon followed from the United States. Slaveholders crossed the Sabine River between Louisiana and Texas with their slaves in defiance of the Mexican Ordinance of Freedom. Restless spirits, discontented at home, joined them. The work of rebellion sped. Our newspapers excited the lust of territorial robbery in the public mind. Certainly Mexico might justly charge our citizens with disgraceful robbery, while in seeking expansion of slavery, our own citizens denied the great truths of American freedom. Sumner is clearly among the minority in his opinions, but when taken in context with Velasco Marquez's, we do get a differing opinion. We get the other side of the perspective. Alright, so 60 seconds. I want you to finalize any categories that you came up with, and we're going to put them on the board as either justified or not justified. Once you have a category, feel free to walk up to the board, get a black marker, and put it in the correct category. And when I say feel free, I mean do. It's not a suggestion.
Wait, everybody?
Well, until we get an exhaustive or a good list, then yes.
So who got, so for number 3, who got what?
You tell me. Who, Rob? Is Sumner supporting America or Mexico? Are you sure? Our newspapers, meaning American newspapers, excited about the loss of territorial robbery. So who's robbing? Guys, if you are not engaged in putting something on the board, then you should be working on your own buckets. Yes. Guys, your classmates need some help. We've only got like 5 things. There's plenty of things that we can come up with. Let's see, second period came up with, took a picture of it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 things were justified. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 for not justified. I find it interesting that most people are on the not justified side.
I could be justified.
Okay, guys, for right now, here's what I want you to do. For the purposes of getting things on the board, I want you to suspend my requirement that you're arguing for your character. Alright? Let's get stuff on the board and then you can move back. There you go.
But also just yeah, that's why I was
You could use it as a supporting detail, not as. Alright, we've got some more stuff up here now.
Mexico spilled American blood on American soil. No,
It's just that crazy.
and then for the not Mexico was just defending. Mexico was defending.
Guys, I did not release you to work collaboratively. If you were talking, then I hope you have your chicken foot done.
Man, I actually do. Look at that.
So, what do we do over here?
Guys,
Okay.
let me rephrase that because you apparently didn't understand. This is independent work. It does not require collaboration, which means that you shouldn't be talking. If you have a question, then you can raise your hand and I'll come around and answer. Yes, Jeff?
Caitlin's just like writing, like, since I can't really write on there and I'm telling her what to write. Like, okay.
Okay.
Completely disregarded Mexico's abolition of slavery.
Oh my gosh. Completely disregarded.
Mexico's. You did Mexico.
Yes. Yeah.
Abolition. ABOLITION of slavery. And the U.S. rock line.
Alright, finish up what you're writing on the board so that we can all see it. Tennessee. Also, guys, we are nearing the end of class. There is a Google URL for a reflection. So if you don't have your phones, you can use a piece of paper, but you need to navigate to that shortener so that we can do our start on our reflection. Remember, there's a dot right here. Well, that was about.
You're Please tell me the question so I can.
I never really wanted
It wasn't found.
never.
The United States justified in going to war with Mexico, use at least two details from primary sources to justify your
It wasn't found. It wasn't found, so.
That's Santa Ana's.
Oh, wow. Never mind. I must have typed it in. There you go. Is that right?
It's the mini scheme.
Oh, man.
Alright, guys, I will take a picture of the board and I'll put it on my website so that we can see what we came up with. But I want to get the reflection up so that we can see what people are saying about the war. Was it justified or not?
Which one is it?
I like Travis's comment. Both sides did scummy things to each other, but I think America is more in the wrong here. Since they paint Mexico as the bad guys in document A and B and don't even show Mexico's arguments to defend itself.
Mr. Jackson, do you want us to turn this in?
Because they went there.
I want you to hang on to it. Guys, here's what I want you to do at home. I want you to make sure that you have, when you come to class tomorrow, have a complete chicken foot on a separate sheet of paper so I can see your thesis in your buckets and know that you're on the right direction.
Do we need to turn this in?
Hang on to everything and